She should have known something was wrong when he didn't answer her third call. Callie Elizabeth Monroe stood in front of the full-length mirror in the bridal suite of St. Mary's Chapel, her wedding dress cascading around her like liquid ivory. The antique lace her grandmother had worn 50 years ago felt heavier today, as if it carried the weight of all the dreams that had led to this moment. Her hazel eyes sparkled with unshed tears of joy, and her long chestnut hair fell in soft waves over her shoulders, exactly the way Archer loved it. "You look absolutely radiant, sweetheart," her mother whispered, adjusting the pearl necklace that had been passed down through 3 generations of Monroe women. The small bridal room buzzed with the gentle chaos of final preparations, her bridesmaids smoothing their dusty rose dresses, her younger sister fumbling with the bouquet of white peonies and eucalyptus. But Callie's phone remained silent. She had called Archer 3 times in the past hour. The first call went straight to voicemail, his deep, familiar voice asking callers to leave a message. The second time, it rang endlessly before cutting to silence. The third call made her stomach twist with an anxiety she couldn't name. "Maybe he's just nervous," her best friend Meredith offered, noticing Callie's worried expression. "You know how men get on their wedding day. He's probably throwing up in some bathroom right now." Callie forced a laugh, but it felt hollow in her chest. Archer Nathan Maddox wasn't the type to get nervous. He was the man who had built a tech company from nothing, who gave presentations to hundreds of investors without breaking a sweat, who had proposed to her on a cliff overlooking the Pacific Ocean with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what he wanted, and what he wanted was her. He had told her so every day for the past 4 years. The chapel bells began to chime, their bronze voices calling the congregation to witness their union. Through the small window, Callie could see guests filling the wooden pews, friends from college, Archer's business associates, her father's co-workers from the auto shop, neighbors who had watched her grow up in their small Virginia town. The late morning sun streamed through stained glass windows, painting rainbow patterns across the altar where she and Archer would promise each other forever. "It's time, honey," her father said softly from the doorway. Thomas Monroe looked distinguished in his rented tuxedo, his calloused hands that had fixed engines and built treehouses and held her through every childhood nightmare, now reaching for hers. Callie's phone buzzed. Her heart leaped as she grabbed it, expecting Archer's name on the screen. Instead, it was a text from his best man. "He's not here. I've been calling for an hour. I don't know what to do." The words blurred as Callie read them again, then again. The bouquet trembled in her hands, petals beginning to fall like snow onto the hardwood floor. Around her, the cheerful chatter of her bridal party faded into a distant hum. "Callie?" Her mother's voice seemed to come from very far away. "What's wrong?" She looked up at the faces surrounding her, concerned, confused, waiting for an explanation she didn't have. The chapel bells continued their joyful song, oblivious to the fact that the groom they were calling had simply vanished. And in that moment, Callie Elizabeth Monroe realized that some stories don't begin with "I do." Some begin with, "Where did you go?" The hardest part wasn't telling 300 guests that there would be no wedding. It was the silence that followed. Callie sat in the empty chapel an hour later, still wearing her grandmother's dress, watching the last of the flower petals settle on the burgundy carpet. The guests had gone home with their whispered theories and sympathetic glances. The catered reception sat untouched in the parish hall. Even the photographer had packed up his equipment, leaving behind only the echo of what should have been the happiest day of her life. Her father sat beside her in the front pew, his large hand covering hers. Thomas Monroe was a man who fixed things, carburetors, transmissions, broken lawnmowers, but he had no tools for a broken heart. "Maybe there's an explanation," he said quietly, his voice rough with the kind of helplessness that comes from watching your daughter's world crumble. "Maybe there was an accident or, Dad," Callie's voice was barely a whisper. His best man checked the hospital. He called his office. He even went to his apartment. She swallowed hard, tasting salt from tears she hadn't realized she was crying. "He's gone. He chose to leave." The words hung in the air like a prayer no one wanted to answer. Callie's phone had been buzzing for the past hour. Concerned friends, confused relatives, a few reporters who had somehow gotten wind of the story. Tech CEO abandons bride at altar. She could already see the headlines, feel the eyes of her small town dissecting every moment of their 4-year relationship, searching for signs they had all missed. But there had been no signs. Just 3 weeks ago, Archer had been helping her taste test wedding cakes. laughing as she fed him bites of lemon and vanilla. 2 weeks ago, he had driven 6 hours to pick up the vintage wedding rings they had found at an estate sale in Charleston. Last week, he had held her close in their shared apartment, whispering about the honeymoon in Ireland, about the house they would buy, about the children they would have. Children. The thought hit her like a physical blow. She pressed her hand to her stomach, where a secret had been growing for 3 weeks, a secret she had planned to tell him tonight, after the reception, when they were alone in their hotel room. The pregnancy test was still hidden in her jewelry box, waiting for the perfect moment that would never come. "Callie, honey, we should go." Her mother's voice was gentle but firm. Margaret Monroe had been the strong one today, fielding phone calls and managing the chaos with the efficiency of a woman who had raised 3 children and buried her own mother. The people are starting to gather outside. Through the stained glass windows, Callie could see the shapes of neighbors and curiosity seekers, their faces pressed against the glass like moths drawn to the flame of someone else's tragedy. In a town of 4,000 people, a runaway groom was front-page news. "I keep thinking he'll call," Callie admitted, her voice breaking. "That he'll have some explanation that makes sense. That he'll tell me he loves me and that this was all some terrible mistake." Her father's jaw tightened. Thomas Monroe was not a violent man, but right now he looked capable of driving to Richmond and having a very direct conversation with Archer Nathan Maddox. "If he walks back through that door, I'm not sure I can be held responsible for my actions." "Dad, don't." Callie stood slowly, the weight of her dress suddenly unbearable. "He's not walking back through any door. He made his choice." As they walked down the aisle, the same aisle she should have walked down as a bride, Callie caught sight of her reflection in the darkened windows. She looked like a ghost in her white dress, haunting the scene of her own abandoned dreams. Outside, the October air was crisp with the promise of winter. The leaves on the maple trees were turning gold and red, and somewhere in the distance, she could hear the sound of children playing in the park, where she and Archer had had their first date. Life was continuing around her, indifferent to her pain. But as she climbed into her father's truck, still wearing her wedding dress, Callie Elizabeth Monroe made a silent promise to herself. She would survive this. She would rebuild, and she would never, ever let anyone make her feel this small again. What she didn't know was that 8 miles away, in a sterile doctor's office, the man she loved was learning that survival itself was no longer guaranteed. "Mama, can we get the blue flowers today?" Callie Elizabeth Monroe looked down at her 3-year-old son Tyler James, whose bright blue eyes sparkled with the kind of enthusiasm that made even the simplest moments feel like adventures. His chestnut hair was tousled from the morning breeze, and a constellation of freckles danced across his nose, a gift from her side of the family that softened features that were unmistakably his father's. "We'll see what Mrs. Henderson ordered, Ty," she said, adjusting the small backpack on his shoulders. "Remember, we're making her garden beautiful for her anniversary party. 47 years, piped up Liam Jack from her other side, his quieter voice carrying the careful precision of a child who listened to everything. Where Tyler was energy and motion, Liam was thoughtfulness and observation. Both boys had inherited Archer's striking blue eyes, but Liam had also gotten his intensity, the way he could look at you and seem to see straight through to your soul. The coastal town of Millbrook, North Carolina, was waking up around them as they walked down Harbor Street toward Callie's flower shop. Fishing boats dotted the horizon, their lights twinkling like stars against the gray dawn sky. The salt air carried the scent of jasmine from the community gardens and the promise of another warm September day. Petals and stems had been Callie's sanctuary for the past 2 years. What had started as a part-time job while she figured out her life had bloomed into something more, a business that was hers, a community that embraced her, a place where she could create beauty instead of dwelling on what had been destroyed. "Morning, Callie," called out Ezra Collins from behind the counter of the Daily Grind coffee shop next door. At 62, Ezra had become something of a father figure to her, always ready with free coffee and unsolicited advice about everything from raising twins to dealing with difficult customers. "Morning, Ezra. The usual, please, and 2 hot chocolates for these guys." Tyler immediately pressed his face against the display case, marveling at the muffins and pastries as if he hadn't seen them yesterday and the day before. Liam stayed close to Callie's side, his small hand finding hers with the instinctive need for connection that had defined him since birth. "You boys excited about starting preschool next week?" Ezra asked, handing Callie her coffee. Black, no sugar, strong enough to fuel a woman who had learned to do everything alone. Tyler is, Callie answered, ruffling her more outgoing son's hair. Liam's still deciding if he wants to share his toys with other kids. I'll share, Liam said seriously, but only the good ones. Ezra chuckled, but Callie caught the look he gave her, the same look most adults in Millbrook gave her when they watched her with the boys. It was admiration mixed with something deeper, a recognition of the strength it took to raise twin toddlers without a partner, to start over in a new place where nobody knew your story. Well, almost nobody. As they settled into their usual corner table, Tyler chattering about the seagulls outside the window, and Liam quietly organizing the sugar packets by color, Callie allowed herself a moment of contentment. This life she had built, modest, predictable, safe, wasn't the life she had dreamed of in that wedding dress 3 years ago, but it was good. It was hers. Her phone buzzed with a text from her assistant. Dana, Mrs. Chen's order is ready for pickup. Also, someone called about the Fall Festival arrangements, said he'd stop by around 10. The Millbrook Fall Festival was the town's biggest event of the year, and Callie had been chosen to provide all the floral arrangements. It was an honor that spoke to how fully she had been accepted into this community, how completely she had become someone new, someone who didn't spend her nights wondering where Archer Nathan Maddox had gone, someone who didn't still keep his picture hidden in her jewelry box, someone who had almost convinced herself that she was over him. Mama, Liam's voice pulled her from her thoughts. Is that man looking at us? Callie glanced up, expecting to see one of the regulars, maybe old Mr. Patterson, who always waved at the boys, or Janet from the post office, who never missed an opportunity to comment on how much they looked like their father. Instead, she saw a figure standing across the street, partially hidden by the morning shadows, a tall figure with dark hair and broad shoulders, a figure that made her blood freeze and her heart forget how to beat, because sometimes the past doesn't stay buried. Sometimes it comes looking for you. Time stopped the way it does in car accidents. That suspended moment when you see the impact coming but can't move fast enough to prevent it. Callie's coffee cup slipped from her fingers, hot liquid spreading across the wooden table like spilled secrets. Across the street, partially hidden by the shadow of Murphy's hardware store, Archer Nathan Maddox stood as still as a photograph, his eyes locked on her face with an intensity that made her skin burn. 3 years. 3 years of building walls, of convincing herself she was over him, of learning to sleep without reaching for his side of the bed. 3 years of telling herself that if she ever saw him again, she would be ready. She wasn't ready. Mama, Tyler's voice seemed to come from underwater. You spilled your coffee. But Callie couldn't look away from the ghost across the street. Archer looked different. Thinner, maybe, his dark hair shorter than she remembered. Even from this distance, she could see the way his shoulders held a new kind of tension, as if he had learned to carry weight she couldn't imagine. But his eyes were the same deep blue that had haunted her dreams and her nightmares in equal measure. Who is that man, Mama? Liam asked, his small hand tugging at her sleeve. The one who's staring at us? The question shattered whatever spell had frozen her in place. Callie blinked, her breath coming in short gasps as the reality of the situation crashed over her. Her children, their children, were sitting right here, asking about the father they had never met, the man who had disappeared before they were even born. Nobody, she said quickly, her voice coming out strangled. He's nobody important. But even as she said it, she knew it was a lie. Archer Nathan Maddox had never been nobody. He had been everything. Her first love, her best friend, her future, her destruction. And now he was here, in her safe haven, in the life she had built from the ashes of his abandonment. Ezra appeared at their table with a dish rag, mopping up the spilled coffee with the efficient kindness of someone who had seen enough of life to know when not to ask questions. You okay, honey? You look like you've seen a ghost. If only you knew, Callie thought, finally tearing her gaze away from the window. When she looked back, the shadow by Murphy's hardware was empty. Archer was gone, leaving her to wonder if she had imagined the whole thing. I'm fine, she lied, gathering the boys' backpacks with shaking hands. We should get to the shop. Mrs. Henderson's flowers won't arrange themselves. But as they walked the 3 blocks to petals and stems, Callie felt eyes watching her from every doorway, every parked car, every reflection in the shop windows. Her sanctuary no longer felt safe. The life she had so carefully constructed suddenly felt as fragile as tissue paper. The flower shop was her refuge, filled with the gentle chaos of blooms in various stages of arrangement. White roses for the Fletcher wedding, sunflowers for the elementary school's harvest display, and the elaborate autumn centerpieces for the fall festival that would transform Millbrook's town square into something magical. Tyler and Liam settled into their usual corner with coloring books and crayons, chattering about the cartoon they had watched that morning. For them, this was just another ordinary day. They had no idea that their world had just shifted on its axis. Callie tried to focus on Mrs. Henderson's anniversary arrangement. 47 years deserved something special, but her hands trembled as she trimmed the stems. Every time the bell above the door chimed, her heart stopped. Every shadow that passed by the window made her look up. At 10:15 the bell chimed again, and this time, when she looked up, Archer Nathan Maddox was standing in her flower shop, looking like he had stepped out of a time machine from 3 years ago. He wore a simple navy sweater and dark jeans, his hands shoved deep in his pockets, his expression a mixture of hope and terror that she recognized because she felt it too. "Hello, Callie," he said, his voice exactly the same, rich and warm and capable of turning her world upside down with 2 simple words. Tyler looked up from his coloring book, his blue eyes, so much like his father's, studying the stranger with open curiosity. "Are you here to buy flowers?" Archer's gaze shifted to the boys, and Callie watched as his face went pale, as recognition hit him like a physical blow. She saw the moment he counted backward in his head, the moment he realized what she had been carrying when he left her at that altar. "Tyler, Liam," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos in her chest. "Why don't you go color in the back room? I need to talk to this customer." But as the boys gathered their things, chattering about whether the man would buy the pretty yellow flowers, Callie knew that everything she had worked so hard to build was about to change, because some conversations can't be avoided forever, and some truths are too big to stay buried. "Don't." The word cut through the air between them like a blade. Callie stood behind her workbench, white roses scattered around her like fallen snow, her hazel eyes blazing with a fury that had been simmering for 3 years. "Don't what?" Archer asked, his voice barely above a whisper. He hadn't moved from the doorway, as if he understood that stepping further into her space would be crossing a line he might not be allowed to cross. "Don't you dare look at them like that." Her hands gripped the edge of the workbench so tightly her knuckles were white. "Don't you dare come in here and act like you have any right to them." "Callie, please. I know how this looks." "Do you?" The laugh that escaped her was sharp and bitter. "Do you really? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like the man who left me in a wedding dress 3 years ago just walked into my flower shop and saw his children for the first time. So tell me, Archer, what exactly do you think you know?" From the back room came the sound of Tyler's laughter and Liam's gentle correction about staying inside the lines. Normal sounds, safe sounds, the sounds of a life that Archer had never been part of. "They're mine," he said, and it wasn't a question. The resemblance was undeniable. The shape of their faces, the color of their eyes, the way Tyler tilted his head when he was thinking. "Jesus, Callie, they're mine, and you never what?" She stepped around the workbench, closing the distance between them with the fluid grace of someone who had learned to take up space, to stand her ground. "Never tracked you down to tell you. Never hired a private investigator to find the man who vanished on our wedding day. Never sent you a birth announcement to whatever hole you crawled into." Each word hit him like a physical blow. Archer's jaw clenched, and she could see the muscle in his cheek jumping the way it did when he was fighting to control his emotions. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly." Callie's voice dropped to a whisper that was somehow more dangerous than shouting. "I understand that you looked me in the eye 3 weeks before our wedding and told me you couldn't wait to start our family. I understand that you helped me taste wedding cakes and pick out flowers and plan a honeymoon. I understand that you made love to me the night before you disappeared and whispered that you'd love me forever." The color drained from Archer's face. "Callie, I understand," she continued, her voice growing stronger with each word, "that while I was standing in that church in my grandmother's dress, wondering if you were dead in a ditch somewhere, you were making a choice, and that choice wasn't me. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like?" The question hung between them. 3 years of pain and confusion and sleepless nights condensed into 4 simple words. Archer opened his mouth, then closed it again. She watched him struggle, watched him search for words that could possibly explain the unexplainable, and in that moment of silence, She saw something in his eyes that she hadn't expected, not just regret, but anguish. Raw, desperate anguish. You want to know what it was like? His voice was rough, as if the words were cutting his throat on the way out. It was like drowning. It was like being told that everything you thought you knew about your future was a lie. It was like, stop. Callie held up her hand, her own pain suddenly too raw to bear his. Just stop. I don't want your metaphors, Archer. I don't want your poetry. I wanted you. I wanted you to show up. I wanted you to marry me and hold my hand when I threw up every morning for 3 months and be there when your sons took their first steps and said their first words. Sons. He repeated the word like a prayer. How old are they? 3. They turned 3 in June. She watched the math register in his eyes, watched him realize that she had been pregnant on their wedding day. Tyler James and Liam Jack. Tyler's the one who never stops moving, and Liam's the one who sees everything. They both love pancakes and story time and building blocks. Tyler wants to be a firefighter, and Liam wants to be a veterinarian. They ask about their daddy sometimes, and I tell them he had to go away. Archer's eyes filled with tears he was too proud to let fall. Callie, if you knew what I was going through. But I didn't know, did I? The words came out tired now, worn thin by 3 years of carrying this weight alone. You made sure I didn't know. You made the choice for both of us. From the back room came Tyler's voice. Mama, can we have a snack? The sound of her son's voice broke the spell. Callie straightened, transforming back into the mother she had become. Strong, protective, focused on what mattered most. You need to leave, she said quietly. Callie, please, give me 5 minutes to explain. No, the word was final. You don't get to walk back into our lives and demand explanations. You don't get to see them confused and asking questions I'm not ready to answer. You don't get to turn their world upside down the way you turned mine. Archer stood there for another moment, his hands clenched at his sides, his whole body vibrating with the effort to stay in place. Then, slowly, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. I'm staying at the Seaside Inn, he said, placing the card on her workbench. Room 237. When you're ready to hear the truth, the real truth, call me. He turned to go, then stopped at the door. Callie, for what it's worth, they're beautiful. Both of them. You've done an incredible job. And then he was gone, leaving only the lingering scent of his cologne and a business card that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. In the back room, Tyler started singing a song about boats, and Liam joined in with his softer voice. Callie picked up the card with trembling fingers. Archer Nathan Maddox, CEO, Maddox Technologies. The same name, the same company. As if the last 3 years had been nothing more than a brief intermission in his perfect life. But for her, they had been everything. The card burned in her pocket all day like a secret she couldn't forget. Callie went through the motions of her Tuesday routine, picking up Tyler and Liam from their playdate with the Peterson twins, grocery shopping at Miller's Market, where Mrs. Chen insisted on giving the boys free cookies, preparing dinner while they built elaborate towers with wooden blocks on the kitchen floor. Normal life, ordinary moments, the kind of peaceful evening that usually filled her with quiet contentment. But tonight, everything felt different. Every time Tyler laughed, she heard echoes of Archer's voice. Every time Liam looked at her with those serious blue eyes, she saw the father he had never met staring back at her. Mama, you're stirring too fast, Liam observed from his perch at the kitchen table, where he was carefully coloring a picture of a lighthouse. The soup will get dizzy. Callie forced herself to slow down, to breathe, to focus on the simple task of making dinner for her children. Mac and cheese from a box, their favorite, with apple slices and the organic milk she splurged on because growing boys needed calcium. Can we have story time after dinner? Tyler asked, abandoning his blocks to wrap his arms around her legs. At 3, he was all affection and energy, the kind of child who hugged trees and talked to strangers and believed that everyone in the world was basically good. Of course, baby. She ruffled his hair, that same chestnut brown that caught the light just like Archer's. What story do you want to hear? The one about the brave captain. Tyler bounced on his toes. The one who sails far away but always comes home. Callie's hand stilled on the wooden spoon. Of all the books in their small collection, why did he have to choose that one? The story about a sea captain who leaves his family to sail dangerous waters, but promises to return before the lighthouse keeper's daughter forgets his face. Maybe we could read something else tonight, she suggested gently. How about the one with the talking animals? But I like the captain's story. Tyler insisted with the stubborn logic of a 3-year-old. He's brave like Daddy. The words hit her like cold water. Tyler had never met his father, had no memories of him, no pictures to study. But somehow, in his child's mind, he had constructed an image of a father who was brave and adventurous and would someday come home. "How do you know Daddy is brave?" she asked, kneeling down to his level. Tyler shrugged, the way children do when they can't explain something they simply know. "He just is. Liam thinks so too. Don't you, Lee?" Liam looked up from his coloring, considering the question with the seriousness he brought to everything. "I think he must be brave to go so far away, but I think he's also maybe sad." "Sad? Why would he be sad?" "Because he misses us," Liam said simply. "That's what makes people go far away sometimes. When they miss someone too much, they have to leave." The wisdom in her 3-year-old's words nearly brought Callie to her knees. How could he understand something she was still struggling to process? After dinner, after baths and story time, they compromised on a book about a friendly dragon. After tucking them into their twin beds and listening to their sleepy chatter fade into silence, Callie found herself alone in her small living room, staring at Archer's business card, room 237. Her phone sat on the coffee table next to the card, its black screen reflecting the light from the lamp she had bought at a yard sale when she first moved to Millbrook. Everything in this house told the story of starting over. Secondhand furniture, mismatched dishes, photographs that began 3 years ago and showed only her and the boys. She picked up the card, turned it over in her hands. On the back, in Archer's familiar handwriting, he had written something. "I never stopped loving you." The words blurred as tears she had been holding back all day finally spilled over. For 3 years, she had convinced herself that love wasn't enough. Love didn't show up at weddings. Love didn't answer phone calls. Love didn't send explanations or apologies or even a single text message to say he was alive. But what if she had been wrong? What if there was more to the story? Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister Rachel. "How are you holding up? Mom told me about your mysterious visitor today. Small towns. Everyone knew everything, usually before it happened." "I'm fine," she typed back. "Just tired. Want me to drive down this weekend? I could watch the boys while you figure things out." Callie stared at the message for a long time. Figure things out. As if the sudden reappearance of the man who had shattered her world was just another problem to solve, another item to check off her to-do list. "Maybe," she finally replied. "Let me think about it." The house settled around her with the familiar creaks and sighs of old wood and older dreams. Through the thin walls, she could hear Mrs. Dalton's television next door, and somewhere in the distance, the sound of waves meeting shore. These were the sounds that had comforted her for 2 years, the soundtrack of the life she had built from scratch. But tonight, they weren't enough to drown out the voice in her head that sounded suspiciously like Archer. "When you're ready to hear the truth, the real truth." At 11:47 p.m., Callie Elizabeth Monroe picked up her phone and dialed the number for the Seaside Inn. "Room 237, please," she said when the night clerk answered. The phone rang once, twice. Callie." Archer's voice was rough with sleep and something else. "Hope, maybe, or fear. I need to know," she said simply. "I need to know why you left." There was a long pause, and she could hear him breathing, could picture him sitting on the edge of some generic hotel bed, trying to find words for the unfindable. "Can you meet me?" he asked finally. "Tomorrow morning? There's a bench by the lighthouse, overlooking the water. I used to see you there sometimes, with the boys. You've been watching us." "Not watching. Just, I needed to see that you were okay, that they were okay. I needed to know that leaving you was worth it." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. 10 o'clock, she said. "And Archer? This better be the truth, the real truth, because if you hurt me again, if you hurt them, I will make sure you never find us again." "I understand," he said quietly. "And Callie, thank you for calling, for giving me this chance." She hung up without saying goodbye, her heart hammering against her ribs like a caged bird trying to escape. Tomorrow, she would learn why the man she loved had destroyed everything they had built together. Tonight, she would try to survive the waiting. She almost didn't go. At 9:55 a.m., Callie sat in her car outside the lighthouse, watching Archer through her windshield as he paced back and forth on the wooden bench overlooking the Atlantic. Even from this distance, she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he kept running his hands through his hair. The same nervous habit he'd had in college when he was preparing for difficult presentations. The boys were safely at daycare, where Miss Patricia would let them plant seeds in little paper cups and teach them songs about autumn leaves. Normal, innocent activities for children who had no idea their mother was about to learn why their father had vanished from their lives. "You can still leave," she told herself. "Drive away. Go back to the flower shop. Pretend yesterday never happened." But she had tried pretending for 3 years, and it hadn't worked. The questions had followed her through every sunrise, every milestone the boys reached without their father, every moment she caught herself looking for him in crowds. At exactly 10 a.m., she got out of the car. Archer turned at the sound of her footsteps on the wooden walkway, and up close, she could see what distance had hidden. He was thinner than she remembered, his face carrying lines that spoke of sleepless nights and battles fought in silence. But his eyes, those deep blue eyes that had captivated her in their sophomore literature class, were exactly the same. "You came," he said, and there was such relief in his voice that it almost broke her resolve to stay angry. "I said I would." She sat on the far end of the bench, keeping as much distance between them as the small space allowed. "Talk." For a moment, he didn't say anything, just stared out at the waves crashing against the rocks below. A fishing boat moved slowly across the horizon, and somewhere behind them, she could hear the everyday sounds of Millbrook waking up. Cars starting, doors closing, life continuing. "That morning," he began, his voice barely audible over the wind, "the morning of our wedding, I went to the doctor." Callie's breath caught. "What?" "I'd been having headaches for weeks, blurred vision. I told myself it was stress, wedding nerves, too much caffeine." He turned to look at her, and she saw something in his eyes she had never seen before. Fear. Raw, desperate fear. "The appointment was supposed to be routine, just a checkup so I could tell you I was being responsible about my health." The lighthouse beam swept across the water in its endless rotation, and Callie found herself counting the seconds between each pass, using the rhythm to steady her breathing. "Dr. Morrison ran some tests," Archer continued. "Blood work, brain scans. He said he'd call with the results, probably after our honeymoon, but he called that morning instead." "What did he say?" The words came out as a whisper. "Stage 4 glioblastoma." Archer's voice was clinical now, detached, as if he were reading someone else's medical chart. "Brain cancer. Aggressive. The kind that doesn't give you years to fight it. It gives you months, maybe weeks." The world tilted sideways. Callie gripped the edge of the bench, her knuckles white against the weathered wood. "No, I was supposed to be getting married in 4 hours, he said, and now his voice broke. "I was supposed to promise you a lifetime, promise to love you and protect you and be there for you. And instead, I was being told that I was dying. Why didn't you tell me?" The question came out fierce, angry. "Why didn't you come to me?" "Because I loved you." The simplicity of the statement hit her like a physical blow. "Because I knew that if I told you, you would have stayed. You would have married me anyway, spent our honeymoon in hospital waiting rooms, watched me deteriorate, held my hand while I died, and I couldn't do that to you." Tears were streaming down her face now, hot and fast. "And that wasn't your choice to make, wasn't it?" He turned to face her fully, and she could see the 3 years of anguish written in every line of his face. "Callie, you were 24. You had your whole life ahead of you. You wanted children, a family, a future. I was going to take all of that away from you. You took it away anyway." The words exploded out of her. "You think leaving me at that altar was kinder? You think disappearing without a word was protecting me? I thought—" He stopped, took a shaky breath. "I thought it would be easier for you to hate me than to bury me." The lighthouse beam swept across them again, and in that brief moment of illumination, Callie saw him clearly, not as the man who had abandoned her, but as the terrified boy who had tried to save her the only way he knew how. "You were wrong," she said quietly. "You were so wrong. I know that now." His hand moved toward hers, then stopped. "I know I should have told you, should have given you the choice. But Callie, I was 29 years old and I had just been told I was going to die. I wasn't thinking clearly, I was just scared." "What happened?" she asked. "After you left, I drove to Boston, checked myself into Mass General, started treatment immediately. Surgery, chemo, radiation, the works." He rubbed his temple, and she noticed a faint scar along his hairline. "I spent the next 2 years fighting for my life. And you know what kept me going? The thought that somewhere you were living the life you deserved. Maybe falling in love again. Maybe happy. Happy? The word came out bitter. Archer, I was pregnant. I was carrying your children. And you left me alone. The color drained from his face. You were... I found out the week before the wedding. I was going to tell you on our wedding night. She watched as the full weight of what he had done settled on his shoulders. So while you were in Boston playing the noble martyr, I was throwing up every morning and trying to figure out how to raise twins by myself. Twins. He said the word like a prayer. Jesus, Callie. I'm so sorry. I'm so goddamn sorry. Are you? She asked. Are you really? Because it seems to me like you made a decision 3 years ago, and now you're back because it's convenient for you, because you survived, and now you want to collect on the life you threw away. That's not why I'm here. Then why are you here, Archer? Why now? He was quiet for a long moment, watching the waves crash against the rocks below. When he spoke, his voice was so soft she had to strain to hear it. Because I never stopped loving you. Because every day for 3 years, I woke up regretting the choice I made. Because I'm finally healthy enough to try to earn your forgiveness. He turned to look at her, and she saw tears in his eyes. And because I saw them, Callie, I saw our boys, and I realized that I don't just want to survive anymore. I want to live. The lighthouse beam swept across them one more time, and in that moment, Callie Elizabeth Monroe had to decide whether love was worth the risk of being broken again. I need time, she said finally. I need time to think about this, about what it means, about what's best for Tyler and Liam. I understand. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn photograph, the engagement picture they had taken at the botanical gardens, both of them laughing at something the photographer had said. I carried this with me through everything, through every treatment, every surgery, every night I thought I might not see morning. You saved my life, Callie. Even when you didn't know it. She took the photograph with trembling hands, and for a moment, she could remember what it felt like to believe in forever. I should go, she said, standing up. The boys will be expecting lunch. Callie. He stood too, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. Whatever you decide. Thank you. For listening. For giving me the chance to explain. She walked back to her car without looking back, the photograph clutched in her hand like a piece of her own heart. Some truths, she realized, didn't make the past hurt less. Sometimes they only made the future more complicated. The photograph sat on her kitchen counter for 3 days like an accusation. Callie found herself staring at it while making coffee in the morning, while preparing the boys' own snacks, while washing dishes after dinner. In the picture, she and Archer looked impossibly young, impossibly happy, impossibly sure that love was enough to conquer anything. She had been wearing the yellow sundress he loved, the one that brought out the gold flecks in her hazel eyes. He had his arms wrapped around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder, both of them laughing at something that seemed hilarious at the time, but she couldn't remember now. They looked like people who believed in forever. Mama, why do you keep looking at that picture? Tyler's voice startled her out of her reverie. He was sitting at the kitchen table, carefully building a tower with his blocks while Liam worked on a puzzle nearby. Both boys had inherited their father's ability to focus intensely on tasks, though Tyler's focus usually lasted about 5 minutes while Liam could work on something for an hour. It's just an old picture, baby, she said, turning it face down on the counter. But you look sad when you look at it, Liam observed without looking up from his puzzle. At 3 hours, he was already disturbingly perceptive, able to read emotions in a way that sometimes made Callie feel like he could see straight into her soul. I'm not sad, she lied. Just thinking. About the man from the flower shop, Tyler asked, abandoning his blocks to climb onto his mother's lap, the one who looked like us. Callie's breath caught. She had hoped they hadn't noticed the resemblance, that their 3-year-old minds hadn't made the connection. But Tyler had always been observant in his own way, and Liam saw everything. What do you mean? Looked like you. He had our eyes, Liam said simply, finally looking up from his puzzle. And Tyler's chin, and my nose. Maybe. Do you think he was our daddy? Tyler asked, his blue eyes so much like Archer's, studying her face with unsettling directness. The question hung in the air like smoke. Callie had always been honest with her children, age-appropriately but truthfully. When they asked about their father, she told them he had to go away before they were born, that sometimes grown-ups made difficult choices, that it wasn't their fault. But she had never prepared for this moment. when her past would walk into her present and force her to choose between protecting them and telling them the truth. Why would you think that? She asked carefully. Tyler shrugged. The way children do when they can't explain instinct. He looked at us the way you look at us, like we were special. And he seemed sad, Liam added, setting down a puzzle piece. The way you get sad sometimes when you think we're not looking. The wisdom in her 3-year-old's words nearly brought her to her knees. How could they understand something she was still struggling to process? Before she could answer, her phone rang. The display showed her sister Rachel's number, and Callie grabbed it gratefully, needing the distraction. How are you holding up? Rachel asked, without preamble. At 31, her older sister had always been the practical one, the problem solver, the voice of reason when Callie's romantic heart led her astray. I'm fine, Callie said automatically, stepping into the living room where the boys couldn't overhear. Everything's fine. Mom told me he's been staying at the Seaside Inn for a week, that he's been asking around town about you and the boys. Small towns. Nothing stayed secret for long. We talked, Callie admitted. He explained why he left. There was a pause. And I don't know what to do with the explanation. Another pause, longer this time. Rachel knew her well enough to read between the lines. Cal, honey, I need to ask you something and I need you to answer honestly. Do you still love him? The question she had been avoiding for 3 days hit her like a physical blow. It doesn't matter if I love him. Of course it matters. It's the only thing that matters. No, Callie said fiercely. What matters is Tyler and Liam. What matters is protecting them from getting hurt the way I got hurt. But what if he doesn't hurt them? What if he's really changed? What if he gets sick again? The words tumbled out before she could stop them. What if he comes into their lives and becomes their whole world and then he dies? How do I explain that to 3-year-olds? How do you explain to them that you kept their father away from them when he wanted to be part of their lives? The question silenced her. Through the doorway, she could see Tyler and Liam playing together. Tyler chattering about his blocks while Liam listened with the patience of someone twice his age. They were good boys, happy boys, well-adjusted despite growing up without a father. But what if they didn't have to grow up without him anymore? I'm scared, Rach, she whispered. I know, honey, but being scared isn't a reason to make a decision. Love is a reason. Fear is just fear. After hanging up, Callie returned to the kitchen to find both boys standing by the counter, staring at the overturned photograph. Can we see it? Liam asked quietly. See what? The picture that makes you sad. Against her better judgment, Callie turned the photograph over. Both boys studied it intently, their small faces serious with concentration. You look happy, Tyler observed. You look like you love him, Liam added with the devastating honesty of childhood. I did love him, Callie said softly. Very much. What happened to him? Tyler asked. He got scared, she said, surprising herself with the simplicity of the answer. He got scared and he made a bad choice. But he came back, Liam pointed out. Scared people can come back if they're brave enough. Sometimes, Callie agreed. Are you going to see him again? Tyler asked. I don't know, baby. It's complicated. Grown-up stuff is always complicated, Tyler said with the exasperated wisdom of a 3-year-old. But love isn't complicated. Love is just love. That afternoon, while the boys napped, Callie found herself walking along the beach, the photograph tucked in her pocket. The October air was crisp with the promise of winter, and the waves crashed against the shore with a rhythm that usually calmed her. But today, nothing could calm the storm in her chest. She thought about Archer's words at the lighthouse, about the fear in his eyes when he talked about dying. She thought about the scar on his temple, the thinness in his face that spoke of battles fought in hospital rooms. She thought about the photograph he had carried through 2 years of treatment, and the way he had looked at Tyler and Liam in the flower shop, like he was seeing miracles. But mostly, she thought about her son's words. Love is just love. As the sun began to set over Millbrook, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Callie Elizabeth Monroe pulled out her phone and sent a text to the number on Archer's business card. Can you meet me tomorrow? Same place, same time. There are things we need to discuss. The response came almost immediately. I'll be there. She slipped the phone back into her pocket and turned toward home, where 2 little boys with their father's eyes were waiting for dinner and story time and all the ordinary magic of a Tuesday evening. Tomorrow, she would have to decide whether love was worth the risk of building a family that could be broken again. Tonight, She would hold her children close and try to imagine what forever might look like if she was brave enough to reach for it. She brought the boys with her. It wasn't planned. Tyler had woken up with a slight fever, and Liam had refused to leave his brother's side, clinging to him with the fierce loyalty that had defined their relationship since birth. The babysitter had canceled, and Callie had stood in her kitchen at 9:30 a.m., fully dressed and ready to make the most important decision of her life, with no one to watch her children. So she loaded them into the car with juice boxes and coloring books, telling herself it was just practical. But deep down, she knew the truth. If Archer wanted to be part of their lives, he needed to see all of it. The fever-flushed cheeks and cranky moods, the way Liam worried about his brother, the reality of parenting that couldn't be solved with good intentions and apologies. Archer was already waiting on the bench when they arrived, and she watched his face transform when he saw her walking toward him with Tyler in her arms and Liam holding her hand. "Is he okay?" he asked immediately, his eyes focused on Tyler's flushed face with an intensity that surprised her. "Just a mild fever," she said, settling Tyler on her lap as she sat down. "Nothing serious. He'll be fine by tomorrow." But Archer's attention was completely focused on Tyler, who was unusually quiet and clingy. Without asking permission, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small bottle of children's ibuprofen. "I always carry this," he said softly, offering it to Callie. "Old habit from when I was sick. Fever was my enemy for a long time." The simple gesture, the fact that he had children's medicine in his pocket, hit her harder than any grand declaration could have. This was what fathers did. They prepared for scraped knees and fevers, and all the small emergencies that came with loving children. "Thank you," she said, accepting the bottle. "But why do you carry it if you don't have kids?" "Because I hoped," he said simply. "I hoped that someday I might need it." Liam, who had been studying Archer with the careful attention he gave to everything new, suddenly spoke up. "Are you really our daddy?" The question hung in the salt air like a challenge. Callie felt her breath catch, felt the moment crystallize around them with the weight of 3 years of secrets and silence. Archer looked at Liam, really looked at him, and she saw something shift in his face. The carefully controlled mask he had been wearing cracked, revealing the raw emotion underneath. "Yes," he said quietly. "I am." "Where have you been?" Tyler asked, his voice muffled against Callie's shoulder but carrying the simple directness that only children possess. "I was sick," Archer said, and his voice was steady despite the tears she could see gathering in his eyes. "Very sick, and I thought it would be better for you and your mama if I went away." "That was stupid," Liam said with the brutal honesty of a 3-year-old. Despite everything, Callie found herself smiling. "Liam, that's not polite." "But it's true," Liam insisted, still studying Archer. "Mama was sad when you went away. She tries to hide it, but I can tell." "Liam's right," Tyler added, lifting his head to look at Archer. "Mama gets sad sometimes when she thinks we're asleep. She looks at pictures and cries." Archer's composure finally broke. Tears slipped down his cheeks as he looked at these 2 little boys, his sons, who saw their mother's pain with the clarity that adults often missed. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry. I thought I was protecting you, but I was wrong. I hurt the people I love most in the world, and I've regretted it every single day." "Are you still sick?" Liam asked. "No," Archer said. "The doctors say I'm healthy now, but even if I wasn't, I wouldn't leave again. I promise you that." Tyler studied him for a long moment, then reached out with one small hand to touch the scar on Archer's temple. "Does it hurt?" "Not anymore," Archer said softly. "Good," Tyler said matter-of-factly. "Hurt is no fun." And then, with the easy acceptance that only children possess, Tyler climbed down from Callie's lap and walked over to Archer. He studied him for another moment, then climbed up onto his lap as if he had been doing it his whole life. Archer's arms came around him instinctively, carefully, and Callie watched her son's fevered body relax against his father's chest. It was such a simple moment, so natural, that it took her breath away. "I like your voice," Tyler said sleepily. "It sounds like home." Liam, not to be outdone, walked over and leaned against Archer's knee. "Can you tell us about being sick? Mama says it's important to talk about hard things." So Archer told them, in language they could understand, about being scared and making bad choices. He told them about hospitals and medicines and how sometimes grown-ups don't know what the right thing to do is. He told them about loving them even when he was far away, and about coming back as soon as he was brave enough. And through it all, Callie watched her children accept their father with the openness that adults had forgotten how to possess. They didn't need explanations or justifications or promises about the future. They just needed him to be there, to be real, to be theirs. "I have something for you," Archer said eventually, reaching into his other pocket. He pulled out 2 small wooden boats, perfectly carved and painted blue and green. "I made these while I was getting better. I hoped that someday I might have little boys who would like them." Tyler and Liam examined the boats with the reverence children reserved for special treasures. Each boat had their initial carved into the hull, T for Tyler, L for Liam, and tiny white sails that caught the ocean breeze. "They're beautiful," Callie said softly, and she meant it. She could picture Archer in some hospital room, carving these boats with shaking hands, holding on to hope when hope seemed impossible. "Can we sail them?" Tyler asked, already feeling better now that he had something to distract him from his fever. "Of course," Archer said. "That's what boats are for." They walked down to the water's edge, and Callie watched as Archer showed the boys how to launch their boats in the shallow waves. He was patient and gentle, answering their endless questions, catching Tyler when he stumbled on the wet sand, helping Liam retrieve his boat when it drifted too far out. This was what she had dreamed of 3 years ago, watching the man she loved play with their children, seeing her family complete and whole. It was everything she had grieved for, everything she had convinced herself she would never have. "He's good with them," she said to herself, not realizing she had spoken aloud. "I want to be," Archer said, appearing at her side while the boys played in the shallow water. "I want to be good at this, Callie. I want to learn their favorite foods and their bedtime stories and what makes them laugh. I want to be there when they're sick, and when they're scared, and when they have something wonderful to share. I want to be their father, not just the man who gave them his DNA." "And what about me?" she asked quietly. "What do you want from me?" He turned to face her fully, and she saw everything in his eyes, love and regret, and desperate hope, and the kind of vulnerability that only came from facing death and choosing to live anyway. "I want your forgiveness," he said. "I want the chance to love you the way I should have loved you 3 years ago. I want to build something new with you, something stronger than what we had before. I want to be the man you deserve, the father our boys deserve. And if you get sick again, then we'll face it together," he said without hesitation. "All of us, as a family, the way it should have been from the beginning." Callie looked out at her children playing in the waves. Their laughter carried on the salt air like music. Tyler was chattering excitedly about his boat's adventures, while Liam carefully guided his through imaginary harbors. They looked happy, they looked complete, and for the first time in 3 years, so did she. "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay, okay, we'll try. We'll take it slow. We'll be careful, but we'll try." The smile that spread across Archer's face was like sunrise after the longest night. He reached for her hand, and this time, she didn't pull away. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for giving us a chance." From the water's edge, Tyler's voice called out to them, "Mama, Daddy, come see how far my boat can go." Daddy. The word hung in the air between them, simple and profound and full of possibility. Hand in hand, they walked toward their children, toward the future they were brave enough to build together. Some love stories, Callie realized, don't end with a wedding. Sometimes they begin with the courage to try again. The call came at 2:17 a.m. on a Tuesday, 3 weeks after their first family afternoon at the beach. Callie's phone shrieked through the darkness, jolting her from the first peaceful sleep she'd had in years. The number on the screen was one she didn't recognize, but the area code was local. In small towns, middle-of-the-night calls usually meant one of 3 things: death, birth, or disaster. "Hello," she whispered, slipping out of bed and into the hallway so she wouldn't wake the boys. "Mrs. Monroe, this is Dr. Sarah Phillips at Millbrook General. I have Archer Maddox here, and you're listed as his emergency contact." The words hit her like ice water. "What happened? Is he okay?" "He's stable now, but he came in about an hour ago with severe abdominal pain. We're running tests, but I think you should come in." Callie's hands shook as she ended the call. 3 weeks. 3 weeks of careful steps toward building something new, of watching Archer become the father Tyler and Liam had always deserved, of allowing herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could have their happily ever after. 3 weeks, and now this. She called her neighbor Mrs. Dalton, who arrived in 10 minutes wearing a bathrobe and carrying a thermos of coffee. "Go," the older woman said simply. "I've raised 5 children. These 2 will be fine." The drive to the hospital felt endless and too short at the same time. Callie's mind raced through possibilities, each one worse than the last. The cancer was back. The treatment had failed. He was dying. And this time she would have to watch it happen. She found him in room 314, looking pale against the white hospital sheets but very much alive. His eyes found hers the moment she walked through the door, and the relief in his face was so profound, it nearly brought her to her knees. "It's not what you think," he said immediately, reading her expression. "It's not the cancer." "Then what?" she asked, moving to his bedside. "Appendicitis." He gave her a weak smile. "Apparently, even cancer survivors can get normal sick person problems." The laugh that escaped her was half relief, half hysteria. "Appendicitis? They took it out about an hour ago. Routine surgery, they said. I should be home in a couple of days." He reached for her hand and she let him take it. "I'm sorry they called you. I put you down as my emergency contact without asking. I know we're still figuring things out, but I didn't have anyone else, and I—" "Stop," she said quietly. "I'm glad they called me. I'm glad I'm here." "Are you?" "Yes." The word came out stronger than she expected. "I am." They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, listening to the steady beep of machines and the distant sounds of the hospital's nighttime routine. Through the window, Callie could see the first hints of dawn painting the sky pink and gold. "I was scared," Archer admitted finally. "When the pain started, when I couldn't breathe, for a moment, I thought it was happening again. I thought I was going to die without getting the chance to really be their father, without getting the chance to love you the way you deserve. But you didn't," she said softly. "You're okay." This time, he turned to look at her, and she saw something new in his eyes. Not fear, but acceptance. "Callie, I need you to understand something. I'm never going to be able to promise you that I'll never get sick again. The cancer could come back. I could get hit by a bus. I could have a heart attack at 50. Life doesn't come with guarantees. I know that. But what I can promise you is that I will never, ever make the choice to leave you again. Whatever happens, whatever we face, we'll face it together. I swear to you, on my life, on our children's lives, I will never abandon you again." Tears were streaming down her face now. 3 years' worth of pain and fear and carefully guarded hope finally breaking free. "I believe you," she whispered. "Do you? Really?" "Yes." She leaned forward and kissed him, soft and careful and full of all the love she had been afraid to feel. "I love you, Archer. I never stopped loving you. I tried to, but I couldn't. I love you too," he said against her lips. "God, Callie, I love you so much it physically hurts sometimes, even with appendicitis. Especially with appendicitis." She was laughing now, crying and laughing at the same time, and he was laughing too, despite the pain and the exhaustion and the IV in his arm. It felt like coming home after the longest journey of her life. "I want to marry you," he said suddenly. "Archer, I know it's too soon. I know we have a lot to figure out still, but I want you to know, when you're ready, when the boys are ready, when it feels right, I want to marry you. I want to be your husband and their father and the man who comes home to you every night for the rest of my life." "What if I'm never ready?" she asked. "What if I can't get past the fear?" "Then I'll wait," he said simply. "I'll wait as long as it takes. I'll prove to you every single day that I'm not going anywhere. I'll prove it to Tyler and Liam. I'll prove it to myself." The sun was fully up now, streaming through the hospital window and painting everything in golden light. Somewhere in Millbrook, her children were waking up, probably wondering where she was, probably excited about the day ahead. Normal children with normal problems and normal joys, who now had a father who would be there for all of it. "They're going to want to visit you," she said. "Are you okay with that?" "I'm okay with it. They've been asking about you every day since the beach. Tyler wants to show you his new Lego creation, and Liam has been practicing writing his name so he can sign a card for you." "They want to make me a card?" "Liam's idea. He said sick people need cards to help them feel better." Archer's eyes filled with tears. "I don't deserve them. I don't deserve any of this." "Yes, you do," she said firmly. "You made a mistake, Archer. A big one, a terrible one. But it was made out of love and fear, not selfishness or cruelty. You've spent 3 years paying for it. It's time to forgive yourself. Can you forgive me?" "I already have." The words surprised her with their truth. I forgave you the moment you told me the truth at the lighthouse. I just wasn't ready to admit it yet. Doctor? Phillips knocked on the door then, entering with a clipboard and a professional smile. Good morning, Mr. Maddox. How are you feeling? Like I got hit by a truck that was carrying smaller trucks, Archer said, but he was smiling. But better. Much better. Good. The surgery went perfectly and your recovery should be straightforward. A few days here, a week or two of taking it easy at home, and you'll be good as new. She turned to Callie. Laura, are you his wife? Callie opened her mouth to correct her, but Archer spoke first. She's my family, he said simply. That's all that matters. And looking at him lying there in that hospital bed, holding her hand like she was his anchor to the world, Callie Elizabeth Monroe realized that he was right. Family wasn't just about marriage certificates or shared last names. It was about choosing each other, day after day, through sickness and health, through fear and joy, through all the ordinary moments that made up a life. It was about love brave enough to try again. It was about forgiveness deep enough to heal old wounds. It was about hope strong enough to build a future on. Yes, she said to Dr. Phillips, not taking her eyes off Archer's face. I'm his family, and for the first time in 3 years, the word forever didn't scare her. It felt like coming home. 2 years later, the lighthouse keeper's daughter got her happy ending after all. Callie Elizabeth Maddox stood in the kitchen of their new house on Seashell Drive, watching through the window as Archer helped 5-year-old Tyler and Liam build a treehouse in the massive oak that had sold her on this property. The October morning was crisp with autumn's promise, and the boys' laughter carried on the salt-scented breeze like music she had waited her whole life to hear. "Higher, Daddy!" Tyler called out, his tool belt, a miniature version of his father's, bouncing as he climbed the wooden ladder Archer had carefully constructed. "I want to see the ocean." "Safety first, Captain," Archer called back, holding the ladder steady while Liam passed up another board with the careful precision that defined everything he did. At 5, her quieter son had developed an engineer's mind, studying each piece of wood before declaring it worthy of their castle in the sky. Callie smiled, stirring the pancake batter that had become their Sunday morning tradition. The kitchen still smelled faintly of paint and possibility. They had moved into this house 6 months ago, after a year of careful courtship, family dinners, and bedtime stories that always ended with, and they all lived happily ever after. The proposal had come last Christmas, not grand or dramatic, but perfect in its simplicity. Archer had gotten down on one knee in their living room while the boys decorated cookies, offering her the same ring he had bought 4 years ago, the one she had returned to him with tears and heartbreak. This time, when he asked if she would marry him, she had said yes without hesitation. "Mama," Tyler's voice pulled her from her memories. "Come see." She walked onto the back porch, drying her hands on the dish towel that read, "The Maddox Family Est. 2027, a wedding gift from her sister Rachel." Archer looked up from where he was hammering, his face bright with the kind of joy that came from being exactly where you belonged. "Look how high we are," Liam called down, his serious face breaking into a grin as he waved from the platform they had built together. "We can see Mrs. Henderson's garden and the lighthouse and everything." "It's beautiful, boys," she called back, "but breakfast is ready when you are." 5 more minutes, Tyler pleaded, and she could see Archer trying not to laugh at his son's negotiation tactics. 5 more minutes, she agreed. "But then pancakes, and after breakfast, we need to get ready for the fall festival." This year, for the first time, they would attend as a complete family. Archer had volunteered to help with the pumpkin carving station, while Callie provided the floral arrangements, a partnership that had become the foundation of everything they built together. Her phone buzzed with a text from Dana, her assistant at the flower shop. "Mrs. Chen wants to know if you can do the flowers for her granddaughter's Sweet 16. I told her you're booked solid until December, sir, but she's persistent." Callie smiled, typing back, "Tell her we'll make it work. We always do." Petals and stems had grown beyond her wildest dreams, expanding into wedding planning and event design. Last month, she had hired 2 additional designers, and there was talk of opening a second location in the next town over. But success felt different now, sweeter, more meaningful, when shared with someone who understood that dreams were better when built together. "Callie?" Archer's voice was closer now, and she looked up to find him standing at the bottom of the porch steps, sawdust in his hair and contentment in his eyes. The boys want to know if they can have hot chocolate with their pancakes. It's 70 degrees outside, she pointed out. I know, but apparently, treehouse building requires hot chocolate, regardless of temperature. Of course it does, she laughed, reaching out to brush the sawdust from his hair. How's the construction going? Good, really good. Tyler wants to paint it blue like the ocean, and Liam thinks we should add a rope ladder for emergencies. They're both convinced it needs a flag. What kind of flag? One that says Maddox Boys Only, he said with a grin. Though Tyler made an exception for you. He said mamas are always allowed in tree houses. How generous of him. Archer stepped closer, his hands finding her waist with the easy familiarity of 2 years of learning each other again. There's something else they want to add to the treehouse. What's that? A room for the baby. Callie's breath caught. Archer, I know we said we'd wait, he said quickly. I know we're still figuring everything out, still building this life together. But watching them up there, seeing how happy they are, how secure they feel, I can't help but think about how amazing it would be to have another little person to love. Is that your biological clock talking? Or are you just feeling sentimental because they called you daddy without prompting? Both, he admitted. Definitely both. She looked up at their sons, because that's what they were now, legally and completely, laughing as they planned their fortress in the sky. Tyler was gesticulating wildly as he explained his vision, while Liam listened with the patience of someone who had learned that big dreams required careful planning. What do you think? Archer asked softly. Are we ready for 3 kids under 6? I think, she said, standing on her tiptoes to kiss him, that we're ready for whatever comes next. Together. Is that a yes? That's a, let's see what happens, she said. But yes, I'd love to have another baby with you. The smile that spread across his face was like sunrise after the longest night. He spun her around on the porch, both of them laughing like teenagers, until Tyler's voice called down from the treehouse. Are you guys being gross again? Probably, Archer called back. Come down for breakfast, and we'll try to keep the grossness to a minimum. As they walked back into the house, Archer's arm around her waist, the boys racing ahead to wash their hands, Callie caught sight of their wedding photo on the mantel. It had been a small ceremony, just family and close friends, held on the beach where they had first reconnected. She had worn a simple white dress and carried wildflowers from her own shop. Archer had cried when she walked down the aisle, and Tyler and Liam had served as ring bearers, taking their job so seriously that the entire congregation had laughed with joy. In the photo, they were all holding hands, her and Archer in the center, Tyler and Liam on either side, with the lighthouse visible in the background. They looked like what they were, a family that had fought for each other, a love story that had refused to end with heartbreak. Mama, Liam said, climbing onto his chair at the kitchen table. Will you tell us the story again? Which story, sweetheart? The one about how you and Daddy found each other. It had become their favorite bedtime story, the tale of a princess who waited for her prince to come home, and a prince who had to learn how to be brave enough to stay. She had adapted it for young ears, turning cancer into a dragon that had to be defeated, turning fear into a spell that had to be broken with love. After breakfast, she promised, and after the fall festival, and after baths and teeth brushing, and after treehouse building, Tyler added, and after treehouse building, she agreed, as they ate pancakes and hot chocolate in their sunny kitchen, as Archer helped Tyler cut his food and reminded Liam to drink his milk, as their ordinary Sunday morning unfolded with all its beautiful, mundane magic. Callie thought about the woman she had been 3 years ago. That woman had believed that love was fragile, that happiness was temporary, that the only way to protect your heart was to guard it carefully. She had learned instead that love was resilient, that happiness was a choice made daily, and that the bravest thing you could do was trust someone with your whole heart. Later that day, at the fall festival, she would watch Archer teach a group of children how to carve pumpkins, his patience endless as he guided small hands with sharp tools. She would see Tyler make friends with every child in Millbrook, and Liam quietly help the younger kids when they struggled with their jack-o'-lanterns. She would stand in the town square surrounded by the flowers she had arranged, holding hands with the man she had chosen to love again, watching their children play under string lights and stars. And she would think, as she had thought every day for the past 2 years, some love stories don't end. They just learn how to begin again, and again, and again, forever. Would you have the courage to love someone like this? What would you have done in Callie's place, forgiven him immediately, or made him work harder to earn your trust back? Share your thoughts about second chances and the kind of love that survives even the hardest tests. Your participation in our channel is very important to us. Please leave your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below letting us know what you thought. Your feedback and support mean a lot to us. Stay tuned for more exciting stories.